Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're tackling something that's keeping European enterprise leaders up at night: the EU AI Act, and what it means for organizations scrambling to get ready by 2026. Sam, this enforcement deadline is less than 2 years away. How are enterprises actually positioned right now?
Thanks, Alex. The short answer? Not well. About 78% of European enterprises haven't even started formal readiness assessments. We're looking at a compressed timeline where the prohibition and high-risk provisions go live on February 2nd, 2026, and most organizations are still figuring out which of their AI systems even exist, let alone how to classify them under the Act.
That's a staggering number, and I imagine the stakes are high if organizations miss the deadline. What are we talking about in terms of penalties?
We're talking $10 million to $30 million in fines, or up to 6% of annual global revenue, whichever is higher for systemic violations. That's not a compliance nicety anymore. It's a board-level accountability issue. The EU isn't playing around with this.
Right. So let's break this down into something practical. When we talk about the EU AI Act, there are different categories of risk, right? Not all AI is treated equally.
Exactly. The Act distinguishes between prohibited practices, like social credit systems or real-time biometric identification in public spaces, and high-risk categories that require extensive documentation, risk assessments, and human oversight. Then there's a middle tier for generative AI systems that need specific transparency obligations and record-keeping. Chatbots and large language models fall into this transparency-required or high-risk bucket depending on context.
And I imagine a lot of enterprises are using chatbots for customer service and hiring. So those are definitely in scope?
Absolutely. About 63% of enterprise AI implementations involve customer-facing or employment-related use cases, according to McKinsey. So the majority of deployed systems are going to require formal risk documentation and audit trails. An enterprise running a chatbot for hiring decisions? That's high risk. One moderating content in real time? Also likely high risk. There's no avoiding this.
So if most enterprises aren't ready, what's the path forward? Is there a maturity model or framework they should be using to get their house in order?
There absolutely is. We're talking about 5 key dimensions of AI governance maturity: strategy and alignment, risk management, transparency and explainability, data governance, and operational resilience. Organizations need to assess where they sit on a spectrum, typically reactive, managed, or optimized. Only about 23% of European enterprises have reached managed or optimized maturity, so there's a huge capability gap to bridge.
Let's unpack those maturity levels a bit. What does reactive versus managed versus optimized actually look like in practice?
Reactive is ad hoc. You're scrambling to respond to compliance questions as they come up, no real process in place. Managed means you've documented your processes, assigned clear roles and accountability, and you're tracking compliance systematically. Optimized means you've built predictive risk management into your workflows. You're continuously monitoring and adapting governance without firefighting.
That progression makes sense. But before you can even assess maturity, don't you need to know what AI systems you actually have? I suspect that's a problem for a lot of organizations.
You've hit on something huge. Most enterprises discover they operate 2 to 3 times more AI systems than they initially thought. This happens because adoption is decentralized. Business units deploy chatbots, recommendation engines, predictive models without central tracking. So the very first step is doing a comprehensive inventory. You need to know the system name, owner, business function, the model type, training data sources, update frequency, and how it classifies under the EU AI Act.
That sounds like a massive undertaking. How long does a proper inventory typically take?
It depends on the organization's size and complexity, but it's not a quick weekend project. You also need to capture current compliance gaps and map stakeholder dependencies: HR, legal, product, security. Once you have that inventory, you can actually start prioritizing which systems pose the highest regulatory and operational risk.
I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier: The idea that compliance is an organizational design problem, not just a technology problem. What does that mean in practical terms?
It means you can't just slap a compliance tool on your existing AI pipeline and call it done. You need AI development, legal, product, and operations teams aligned around shared accountability frameworks. You need clear governance structures, decision-making authority, and escalation paths. When a chatbot deployment decision gets made in product without legal input, that's an organizational design failure waiting to happen.
So we're talking about structural changes to how enterprises make decisions about AI?
Precisely. You need what we'd call an AI-led architecture function, someone or a team with authority and visibility across the entire AI landscape. They're responsible for classifying systems, managing risk inventories, coordinating with compliance, and ensuring transparency obligations are met. Without that, you'll have pockets of compliance in some business units and complete blindness in others.
Given that we're less than 2 years out from enforcement, what should an enterprise prioritize right now if they're just starting?
Phase 1. Complete your AI system inventory and classify everything under the Act. Phase 2. Identify your highest-risk systems, those used in hiring, credit decisions, or content moderation. Phase 3. Build your governance structure and assign accountability. Then you layer in technical controls, documentation, and audit trails. But you can't skip step 1. If you don't know what you have, you can't possibly govern it.
Is there any good news here? Are there regions or types of organizations that are better positioned?
Organizations in places like the Nordic region actually have a head start. They've got strong regulatory infrastructure and digital governance experience from GDPR implementation. Those governance muscles are already in place. If you've built a data protection governance program, you can leverage that foundation to accelerate AI governance maturity. It's not starting from zero for them.
That's encouraging. So the companies that took GDPR seriously are better positioned for this?
Absolutely. The governance disciplines overlap significantly. If you have documentation practices, data mapping, risk assessment frameworks, and cross-functional accountability from GDPR, the EU AI Act becomes an extension of that work, not a completely new endeavor.
All right, let's bring this home. For a listener who's an enterprise leader realizing they need to get moving on this, what's the single most important action they should take this month?
Declare an AI inventory sprint. Get your business units together, map every system they're running, and classify them. Don't overthink it. Just get visibility. That single action will reveal your compliance gaps faster than anything else, and it gives you a baseline to build your governance roadmap from. Without it, you're flying blind.
That's actionable and urgent. Sam, thanks for breaking this down. Listeners, if you want to dive deeper into readiness assessments, governance frameworks, and the operational mechanics of enterprise GenAI governance, head over to etherlink.ai and find the full article. We've put together practical guidance on building your AI governance maturity before that 2026 deadline hits. Thanks for tuning in to EtherLink AI Insights.
Thanks, Alex. And to our listeners, treat this as urgent. The timeline is compressed, but it's absolutely doable if you start now. Don't wait until 2025 to figure this out.